tonight is going to be a little different than normal. Instead of me standing behind a podium, I get behind this table with a strange camera. And I've got set up to view the pages upside down, and the projector to pretend to turn itself over, and lots of fancy technical things to try to help show you guys some of the different books and tools that you can use in studying the Bible. Okay, so I hope that this will be able to give you a little more insight. If I could get someone from the front to bring me the other concordance, that would be good. The one that we give away, the analytical concordance. And I'll use that in a little bit too. But let's go ahead and take a look at some things. Let me turn this off. So the first thing, we're talking about Bible study tools, right? The best tool, the first and most powerful tool that you can have is going to be, first of all, a good translation, right? I'm going to hold this up as an example, not that this is the good translation. Here, I'll hold two up so that way no one's confused, right? These two Bibles together will make a good combo for studying. The translation is your access to the Bible. If you don't understand Greek or Hebrew, then you're going to have to use a Bible translation. And there's translations, like we said the other day, in all sorts of languages, right? More languages probably than any other book in the world. There's translations of the Bible. And so you get to choose whatever translation you want that you're going to study. Now, a lot of those you're not going to be able to read. Right? Can anybody here read Russian or Spanish? And I know a guy maybe that might be able to read some Spanish, but maybe a little Russian here and there. But most of us in this room are probably going to want to stick to English or Cebuano or Tagalog, something like that. Right? And there are translations like that available. English, as a matter of fact, probably has the most translations of any language that I can think of. There are so many English translations available that have been made for the last several hundred years, especially in the last 100 years. There's probably 50 or 100 translations that have been made in English for various purposes. Some of them are very similar, some are very different. Right? There are a few things to keep in mind about a translation. This is the King James Bible. It says God's Word on the top. It is what's known as a literal translation of the Bible. It's very tiny. You'll notice that with a literal translation, it's often going to try to stay word for word to the original Greek, right? Or Hebrew language. And so it might not make much sense sometimes. Right? But the King James is a very accurate translation. Right? It's 400 years old, but it was very well done at the time. Right? They tried to do as good as they could, going word to word. Right? So they would look at the Greek text or the Hebrew text, and they would translate it into English. And that's why sometimes the word order is kind of strange. Right? See here in verse 17, it says, and Jesus answering said unto them, right? We might not order it that way if we're going to say today. We might just say Jesus answered them, right? Or something like that. And Jesus answered. We can cut out a lot of words, but that's not exactly what it said. This is trying to be a more literal translation. If you look in another translation, like the Easy to Read, for instance, it's probably going to say something a little different. Where are we? Mark chapter 11, verse 17. The Easy to Read translation is what's known as a paraphrase. So if you look here, says, then Jesus taught the people. He said, it's written in the scriptures, my house will be called a house of prayer. Right? Wait, that's a different verse. Oh, that's because I'm in chapter 12. Let's flip. Chapter 12. Yes. Notice that it just says, then Jesus said to them. It doesn't say anything about answering. It leaves that out. Because it's clear, the meaning is the same, but the easy to read is a less of a literal translation. It's more of a paraphrase. As we'll see in our example tomorrow, a paraphrase usually just tries to translate the thought. They don't care so much about the actual words that the original writer used and the order that he put them in. They'll mix it all up so that the thought is there, but the order is not the same. Okay? The problem with a paraphrase is it can make your Bible study much more difficult because you don't know exactly what the original writer said. Okay? You only know basically what the basic idea was that he had at the time. And so you have to be very careful when you're studying. There's another kind of translation. The NIV is an example of a dynamic equivalence translation. Right? And what that does is tries to be literal sometimes, but when a literal translation might not make much sense because the word order is very strange or very difficult or something, it will try to paraphrase it, try to just get the thought. But it's going to be a lot easier to use than a paraphrase when you're studying because most of the order is going to be preserved. Right? Most of the things are going to be the same. But it's going to be a lot easier to read than a literal translation. The nice thing about literal translations are they're very accurate, but they're difficult to read. The paraphrase is very easy to read, but it's not very accurate. The dynamic equivalence tries to be somewhere in the middle. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes not. Right? So with the dynamic equivalence, you have to be careful that you're not sacrificing your accuracy too much. And so that's one thing to consider when you're studying the Bible. Another is that when you look at the Bible and your translations, what you're going to use, you do not just want to pick one. Because no translation is perfect. Right? No translation is suited to study in all the different areas, right? So you want to get a literal translation. You might want to look at a paraphrase or a dynamic equivalence and compare different ones and read down through them. And you can see where there's differences or where there are similarities. Where it's the same, you can say, I'm sure that this is good. If it's different, you say, why is it different here? Why is there such a big difference in this passage? Maybe one translation does not include a certain verse because of textual evidence, right, from old ancient manuscripts that we have, copies from thousands of years ago. And that happens sometimes. Some verse that might be very well respected in an older translation like the King James might be missing in the easy to read, or might be in a footnote of the NIV because it's from a later manuscript and not an earlier one. There are lots of things to consider when studying the Bible. And so when you want to look at translations, you want to choose several and study them together. Now, before that could be a problem because Bibles can be expensive. But they're getting cheaper and cheaper, and as we'll see in a while, you can get many of them for free on the internet. So there's no excuse for not studying several different Bibles. If you have access to the internet, then you can study just about whatever you want. So a literal translation is nice to have. Dynamic equivalence is good. A paraphrase can be nice to read, but does not want to be your main study Bible. Right? You want to have one of the other two as your main study Bible. Another thing that we need to know, another Bible study tool, is footnotes. Right? I'll give you an example here. In my Bible, in the book of Psalms, way down here at the bottom, notice it says that 37, it's got a little A, and it says 2 manuscripts of the Masoretic text and Dead Sea Scrolls, most manuscripts of the Masoretic text, light in your way. So if we go back to verse 37, turn my eyes away from worthless things, preserve my life according to your word. You see that little A after word right there? That's the A that it's referring to in verse 37. So if we look at that A, and then we take that down over here, that's the phrase that's replaced. So footnotes will often give you more information about something if there's a difference between the manuscripts. So you read the King James, you read the NIV, and there's a difference. We'll look at the NIV footnote. It might tell you why that there's a difference, right? The King James doesn't have footnotes. A lot of really old translations, they don't have any footnotes. But many of the newer ones, the NIV, the Revised Standard Version, the New American Standard Version, made in the last 50 or 100 years, they're all going to have some kind of footnotes. And sometimes they can tell you about textual things. Sometimes if you look in the New Testament, it will give you references to other writings, Job, Isaiah. So if there's a quotation there in that passage, you can look down and you can say, this is a quotation. I can flip over there and see if that's what I'm looking at. It can give you the meaning of names. See here, this word in verse 6 is Aramaic for father. Okay. So that shows us. See over here, you have Abba, father. Right. So Abba is Aramaic for father. We learned that from the footnotes. Footnotes can be a good Bible study tool. That's the first place you want to look for information when you're studying the Bible, because it's right there on the page. Right? You don't have to open another book. You don't have to turn anywhere else. You always want to look. If you see a note, like a little letter floating there above what you're looking at, there's going to be a footnote on that. You want to go investigate. Okay? Look at the footnotes. That is your first Bible study tool. The next one we want to talk about is a concordance. Okay? Now, there are several different kinds of concordances. A concordance is a book that contains a bunch of references to the words in the Bible. If you have a study Bible, like this one, right, in the back there might be a small concordance. See, I have here the concordance. I can look up the words for grace, or good, for instance, and this will show me the times that the word good is used in the Scripture. And notice that it abbreviates the G in good, right? God saw that the light was good. God saw it 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 was good. And these are the verse references in Genesis. Okay? So the concordance will show us where to turn, right? And we get over here. It's still talking about good, right? Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Where's that? That's in Romans, chapter 12, verse 9, right? So we can see that the concordance will tell us where to go. So if we're reading a passage and we've come across a word that we'd like to study some more, if we're trying to find all the evidence, a concordance can be very helpful. Now, a concordance like this, in the back of the NIV, is small, right? Let me see, it's only about this big. Right? That many pages. That's not a lot. Because I have another concordance here that's this big. Right? This is my other concordance. Right? This maroon book here is also a concordance. And these bigger ones contain all the references to all the words found in the Bible. Almost. I mean, it doesn't include words like thee or a or him or it, because those are too common. But all the important words, right, the words that have a good meaning, those are there. Right? Study Bibles might also contain a topical concordance or some kind of topical index where it gives you ideas of, healing or head or heart. You can look up different ideas and it will give you the page number in this particular volume. But let's look for a minute at an actual concordance, a big one. There are a couple of kinds. I'll look at this one here first. This is the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible. And very fancy font. This is an older edition. At home I have a new edition that's all computer type print and everything, and it's really nice. But this one, you want to look up a word. Let's see. So the word know or knowest is on this page. So if I go down, by the way, The Strong's Concordance is indexed to the King James Version of the Bible. Okay? So if you're reading a verse in the King James Bible and you come across a word, you can find it. So if I look, Genesis chapter 30, verse 26, says, "Thou knowest my service, which I have." So if I open up this book here and I go to Genesis chapter 30, verse 26, it says, "Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee. Let me go, for thou knowest my service, which I have done thee." Okay? It's right there. And if I go to the next verse on the list, chapter 30, verse 29, "And he said to him, Thou knowest how I have served thee." Okay? This is the King James Version. Every time I find a reference in here, if I look at it in this Bible, it's going to be there. Okay? The Strong's Concordance, I think, was made in 1880 or 1890. Right? Before computers, before copy machines, before anything, this guy, Dr. Strong, he spent his whole life indexing the entire Bible to create this tool for us to use to help study the Bible. That's some dedication, right? He and a lot of other guys invested a lot of time in creating this work, right? And it can be very helpful to us if we're going to look at all the information, right? Say we want to look at all the references to, somebody give me something, a topic or a name or whatever. Grace. My shelf says grace. Let's look into G's. Now remember, this is King James grace, so it might not be the same as grace in another Bible, but I have to find it. Okay, here we go. Notice, grace. See also disgrace. So if you want to find that, you can. Now let's take a look at how many pages there are on the word grace. And it starts here, and it goes all the way down this column, and comes over here, and down this page, so you get to here. And then it starts the next entry, which is for the word gracious, right? And so, God be gracious unto thee, my son. There, see, gracious is the next word listed there. So all these are references to the word grace, for the grace that should come unto you, for the grace that is to be brought, heirs together with the grace of life. All these verses. So if you want to learn about grace, if you want to do the research about grace, these are all verses that you need to look at. Okay? Now the thing is, we're translating into English from another language, correct? So some of the words that we use, we might use one word for two Greek words. We might use two English words for one Greek word. It's just going to depend on the situation. Notice these little marks here and the number, right? These are the numbers for Greek words. So in this verse here, James chapter 1 and chapter 4, right? There are two different words used. One is the word that's numbered 2143, and one is 5485, right? So that shows us that even though in English it's the word grace, in Greek it's two different words. And we can actually take this and flip to the back where it has a list of the Hebrew words. See, they've got numbers for the Hebrew and the Hebrew letters. And then they have a list of Greek words. So if you're in the Old Testament, you'll use Hebrew. If you're in the New Testament, you'll use Greek. So we look at 2143. Is here at the top of the page. euprepeia, right? Euprepeia, which means good, suitableness, gracefulness, so grace, right? But if we go look at the other word, it'll be a different Greek word, right? We don't have time to look at that. But back here in the back, it's going to contain all these different words. Look, it just goes down the list. All these different Greek words and their numbers, right? And their translation in the King James, right? And so, some words are going to have many different ones, right? Like if we look over here, where am I? The word utter, right? Notice the different numbers that are used for the word utter in all these different things. So there's so many different Greek and Hebrew words that are translated as this one word in English, depending on the situation. Right? Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. Right? But a tool like this will allow us to see, even if we don't understand Greek, we cannot read it, we can look back and see what the Greek word that was used. Then we can use what's known as a lexicon. Right? A lexicon is basically like what's in the back of this book. Or, here's another example of a lexicon. This is Thayer's Greek-English lexicon that we have in our library. Right? The new Thayer's Greek-English lexicon. And it contains the Greek words according to their Strong's numbers. Right? And so I can go and look for more information on this word, 3551, nomos, right? And this is a definition of the word nomos, different usages of it, and different facts about the word, right? So some of these, this lexicon gives a lot of information about different things and tries to explain some things, right? And different usages. So that can be helpful for you to look in other places. Another type of lexicon is much more simple. It will just contain the definitions, right? This is the one in the back of a Greek Bible. And it just has the Greek word and, let's see if I can find some English words. A Greek word and an English word, right? Tekos is the word for wall, right? This is the word for fruit. Teknion is the word for little child, right? So, if you don't know Greek, you're not going to be able to read the funny letters. But if you take some time to learn the alphabet, it can help you to find. You can search, and you can look at these words, and you can do some research. So when you see that an English translation has a different word than another English translation, well, what's the real meaning? Right? Why are they using two different words? And you can look at a lexicon, and maybe it will be that way. One thing to consider when you're using a lexicon, though, is that some lexicons are religiously oriented, right? And over the last 2,000 years, they've gotten definitions that are very religious, right? They don't have much to do with the actual meaning of the word, but they have a lot to do with words that have been used in religion a lot, right? And we're familiar with very religious words that we don't use very much outside, like righteousness, right? Worship, atonement, right? What are their real world equivalents, you might say, right? What's the word holy mean? Does it mean pure, or does it mean special? Okay. See, these are things that you can learn if you have access to a lexicon, and you can study it, and you can find a lot of information. Another helpful thing, if you don't know the Greek language, or you'd like to, get some work using it, is to have an interlinear Bible like this that contains the Greek text with the English text written above it and the numbers in between, so that you can reference them. So this way you can work your way along on the English line, and you can see where you are, but then anytime you need to, you can look at the Greek word right above it, right? And kai, turning, strophes, right? So you can work through that. And it also has a a column with the English translation by itself, so you can kind of find where you are a little easier. This, by the way, is in Luke chapter 7, verse 23, right? And this is a really big interlinear with Greek and Hebrew, right? So this is a big tool. And you might not be able to find one of those, but they have some smaller ones available. Other things are Bible dictionaries. This is the NIV Compact Dictionary of the Bible, right? This is one that we give away here at the Bible Study Center, right? For free if you get 10 perfect attendances in our classes. You attend 10 classes and get perfect attendance, we'll give you one of these books for free. But it contains all sorts of references. You can go and look up different people, like the Hivites, right? What's a Hivite? I have no idea who the Hivites are. But if I scroll down here, I can see that they're one of the 7 nations of the land of Canaan that the Lord delivered into the land of Joshua, into the hand of Joshua. So that's who the Hivites are. And I might be able to find a little more information, right? Or if I'm studying about Canaan, and I hear about high places, what's a high place? Well, this is the great high place at Petra, in the Transjordan. So if you hear about sacrifices being offered on the high places, this is what a high place looked like. It was an elevated platform with some stairs going up, right? It's not necessarily like on the top of a mountain somewhere. It's actually a high place, but just a raised area. That's the high place where they're going to offer the sacrifices. Right? This is a picture of what the Judean desert looks like. Right? You can kind of see, get an idea for some of the landscape in some of the different areas. Ruins of cities, maps that show you the area of the tribe of Reuben, right? This one even has, like for the book of Revelation, it contains a brief outline of the book and basic ideas and different things that are all throughout it. So you can learn a lot of things from a Bible dictionary. You can get an idea of what the temple may have looked like in the time of Jesus, right? All of these things can help you to understand the context. Not the literary context, but the historical context, right? You see what the temple looked like before, Zerubbabel's temple, the one that was built after the captivity. And see, it even has the date for when it was around. It was destroyed in 20 BC, or rebuilt, expanded, I guess, technically. But there's all sorts of things. You can even learn about Shalmaneser, an Assyrian king. This is a stele that he created, made of stone, with all sorts of symbols and text on it, talking about the things that he's done. Right? And you can learn about all sorts of things from these books, and it's very useful. Right? So that's a compact Bible dictionary. There are others that are bigger, that have color pictures. Some are linked to particular versions. This one's linked to the NIV. So if you're using the King James, you might not be able to find it because the name might be spelled differently. Right? But if you're using the NIV, the names are going to be the same. So that's a compact Bible dictionary. Very useful. Let's see, what else do we have? Commentaries are another thing. I don't have an example of any big commentaries, but study Bibles often have notes at the bottom. You can see down here. And these are, in essence, short commentaries about the different verses. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short. Notice this verse in Matthew, right? It's talking about Jesus being led by the Spirit to be tempted. And it talks all about this idea, right? And it goes back and forth talking about Moses and talking about Adam and talking about lots of things, right? That may or may not really have anything to do with this verse, but this is a commentary on this little section. Right? So remember that study notes and study Bibles are commentaries that are readily available, easy to use because it's right there at the bottom of the page like a footnote, but it's not quite the same as a footnote. Right? Some commentaries might be written on a whole book, like the book of Romans. There might be a series of commentaries on the New Testament. I have a commentary on the New Testament at home that's one volume and it's about 4 inches thick. It looks like this Strong's Concordance, but it's a commentary of the New Testament. And it goes through verse by verse, commenting about every single verse. Some of them are like that. And so commentaries can be useful sometimes as a starting point, not as a starting point, but, they can be useful to help you find your way if you get stuck, right? You don't know where else to look. You're looking for more information, like a Bible dictionary or something like that. You want to know more information about something, you can look in a commentary, but you always want to do your own research first, right? You always want to do your own study. You don't want to take a commentary and read it and say, okay, that's what it means, and just leave it at that, right? Because, these notes here might not have anything to do with this verse, actually, but the writer that wrote this put them all together and made a nice little package and explained it all very well. But what if he took something out of context? What if he's religiously biased in his views, right? Commentary can be a very dangerous tool, as much as it can be useful, maybe more so, right? And there's so many commentaries written in the Bible, right, about the Bible over many, many, many years. So be careful when using commentaries. They can be helpful if used correctly, right? But we have to keep in mind that commentaries are not the Word of God, right? They're just the words of men. Another thing that's helpful is a map, right? Some study Bibles also have maps in the back. This one contains several maps. This is a map of Exodus and the conquest of Canaan. This is a map of the 12 tribes of Israel. See, it's color-coded with eastern Manasseh and Zebulun and Asher and Naphtali and Issachar, I think. Yeah. Ephraim, Dan, Benjamin, Judah, Simeon, Reuben, Gad, all the 12 tribes and where they are in the promised land. These can be useful because, where's the land of Benjamin, right? When we talk about the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, what's the division, right? Where is it divided? Well, we know that it's divided along the line of Judah. We can see here's a picture of the Babylonian Empire, right? Or the Assyrian Empire. This is the Babylonian Empire here. And how big it was. Notice the Assyrian Empire went up around this way. The Babylonian Empire extended way down here as well. So they were able to extend their reach. The Roman Empire was different shape. This is a map of Jerusalem. This can give you an idea of where different things probably happened, right? Possible locations for the crucifixion, or where Jesus went before the high priest, where the Last Supper might have taken place, where the temple is over here, right? Jesus did a lot of preaching here. He was arrested over here in the mountains across from the city, right? So we can see all these things in a map. We can see the